പോളണ്ടിൽ എന്ത് സംഭവിച്ചു? പോളണ്ടിനെ പറ്റി നീ ഒരു അക്ഷരം മിണ്ടരുത്.
All right. Hey, Katherine.
Hey, Harsha, how are you today?
I'm great. It's a beautiful spring, almost summer morning in Houston, Texas.
Yeah, we're surprisingly having a bit of a heat wave.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, my face, nobody listening will see, but my face is all red because I went out for a walk, and even with a hat on, I should have had the sunscreen. So
Yeah, my garden, which is like my project in my new house, is thriving. I am so excited for all the flowers that are out there.
I know I had like I did a project for, we had our Canada 150 a few years ago, and I planted 150 tulip bulbs in the front yard, and usually the white ones and the red ones come out at different times, but this year they all came out together. It was like awesome.
Did you do it in the pattern of the flag, or just like?
No, I'm not that. I'm not that organized. I did, however, there were 50 red, 50 white, and 50 a special edition maple leaf tulip that came out that year. And the maple leaf tulips are like, there's 5 of them in the garden. I have no idea. The squirrels must have loved them and have taken them away. So that was a bit of a disappointment.
Maple leaf tulips. Very Canadian.
But yeah, no, no patterns. I'm not that besides, I would have had to, convince Rob that we had to do this too. So
Yes, this is true.
I'm actually really excited for today, and I got more and more excited as I watched a bunch of the films, because we're back with another episode about star kids and nepotism and power structures and however my brain wants to call all this stuff. But we're going to look at Dulquer, Salmaan, Pranav, Mohanlal, and Fahad, Fazil today.
I guess these are like the hopes and the like actual like generation of star kids that like we I think that the Indian industry traditionally thinks of as star kids. Like they grew up together, like they all have, like Fahad and Dulquer especially have stories of like going to see each other when they were kids, and they've been, you hear all the Karan Johar like interviews where like the kids are like, at this party when I was little, Amit uncle did this, that, so like these kids are the ones with that dynamic compared to, some maybe like Prithviraj and Kunjako Govind, who we talked about in the last episode, Vineet, they had a more disconnected from the industry upbringing. But these guys were like really like at the center of the industry growing up.
Well, and for me, this is the period where I started watching films too. So with the exception of Fahad's debut film, which I finally have been able to see, thank goodness, with subtitles, this was the period where I was getting into watching. I remember DQ's debut. I was watching Fahad's films as the DVDs were releasing. So it's quite interesting for me to be able to go back, but also going back and watching some of these earlier films. After watching a lot of films from the late 90s to 2000, it does feel like a huge breath of fresh air all of a sudden.
I specifically remember like Dulquer as having like a debut compared to like Fahad, who had to kind of sneak his way back into the industry. So I think like he is probably the one I was most excited about. Like he was so handsome, and like he got married right before he made his debut, so it was like a whole thing. And I remember calling him DQ in like 2012 to my mom, and she was like, "Who are you talking about?" I was like, "Mama, he said DQ." And she was like, I didn't even know this kid was around, but now everybody loves him.
Well, and so let's start with him, because his debut really is different, and I think took people by surprise, because He made, this film, Second Show, directed by Srinath Rajendran, who hasn't done a lot since Second Show.
It's surprising.
It is surprising to me. There was Kutara, which had Mohanlal in it. I remember getting the DVD, and it had said it was going to have English subtitles, but it didn't. And it's a film that didn't do well at the box office. And I guess I will have to wait and light candles like I did for Fahad's debut, so that somebody will put it on Hotstar or one of these with subtitles eventually, maybe. But I'm also really excited for Kurup, which brings them back together again, and that will be interesting. But this little film with all these unknowns, you go through the credits and it's introducing this one, introducing that one, introducing like a lot of new people, pretty much like a group of friends, if I'm remembering correctly, who did this kind of indie film. And nothing from Mammootty, like not a star kid launch from his star dad at all. And Mammootty is very hands-off with Dulquer's career.
Yep. I sometimes feel like Mammootty barely acknowledges him in public.
Well, I've read some story about, and I don't know if it's true or apocryphal or what, but this story that he went to the set of Bangalore Days, and he pretty much ignored his own son and spoke with Niven and spoke with Fahad and was really, a lot of praise for them and nothing for. But to be honest, I actually like that.
I feel like for me, I think of it as like a very Malayali approach to like you don't acknowledge the elephant in the room. Like you just I'm too ashamed to acknowledge the fact that my son is doing the same job as I am. He didn't set his own path, so he just praises everybody else.
Except his son did set his own path.
Exactly, and I think partly because his dad is the kind of person he is. Not a very, there's nothing to suggest that Mammootty isn't a good dad or whatever. Mammootty has the image of more of a reserved family man compared to Mohanlal. But this, the fact that they keep such a distance in their public images has really served Dulquer well in terms of setting his own image, setting his own identity, setting his own coming up and not ever being actually in his dad's shadow. And the fan clubs obviously Mammootty's fan clubs obviously was a benefit to Dulquer when he launched with Second Show and earlier movies. A lot of the promotion in Malayalam movies is done through the fan clubs, the welfare and clubs. So they'll buy tickets or they'll do charity activities in the name of the movie star. And they did, Dulquer could kind of tap into that very early on compared to, somebody like Niven who had to build his fan club from the ground up, I guess. That is where, nepotism is a core thing where you can literally just tap into that existing network of fan clubs.
They even use that idea in Traffic, where, the very popular actor has a fan club that comes out to help with getting the heart to the right place for his daughter's transplant. It just shows how much power those fan clubs can have.
Exactly. And the fans call, Mammootty Ika, which is a Muslim honorific for older brother. So they call Dulquer Salmaan Kunyika, which means little elder brother. So he gets that moniker, but he also just that is just with the core Mammootty fan base. And then apart from that, Dulquer has this wildly successful career in South India, and he's tried to make it in Bollywood. It's not been as successful, but he has a complete separate public image, which is an interesting case study for a lot of Indian film family dynasties. Everybody has strongly tied their star image to their families, in Telugu cinema. Everybody has such a tight connection to who their dad was, their uncle was, their grandfather is, like with Junior NTR, he literally just uses the same name as his grandfather. Compared to, even Dulquer said that my dad didn't want me to like use his name as my last name. Like, a lot of Malayalis and Tamil people use their dad's first name as their last name. Mammootty didn't name his son with his name because he didn't want people to know that this is my son, and he just gave him a separate name, Dulquer Salmaan, and then their like ancestral family name. So that seems to be a thread in that family, that like they become their own people.
Well, and it really, as I said earlier, it really has worked for Dulquer's benefit. One of the things that struck me going back and watching second show, because I've seen it a couple of times since first watching it. I was really impressed the first time. The second time through, I kind of went, okay, I with some distance and having seen more of his career, I can see the weak spots. But then watching it the past week to prepare, I actually felt more attached to this film as a debut film. And it was quite interesting too, because everyone was talking about Kurup being Dulquer's first out and out, dark role. And I'm thinking, no, because his first role is a grayer character.
Just as a side note, Nyan, he was like a terrible person in Nyan. Yeah. Which that's a movie people forget about all the time. Coming back to second show, I think that was one of like the most media savvy like movie launches ever, because everything I said about him having a separate image from his dad is actually like built from that movie, and it was very intentional. Like, he is one among so many newcomers, and I think it's I don't know if there was a mastermind, but like if I was a PR person, I think that would have been a great job done, which is that like to embed him in a bunch of like newcomers, and not to make him stand out, and to make him seem like this like guy who made it with his like group of like newcomer friends, because at the end of the day, he's the one who's like whose career skyrocketed from that movie. The rest of them are still like, Simon Wayne has a career, but Gautami, like Srinath, and then like they're still like, they don't have, Gautami especially doesn't have much of a career right now. Yeah, I think it was like a masterful move to embed him in that like newcomer movie, and then to like launch him from there.
I'd almost think though that he's savvy enough, and and you can see that through the choices he's been making, and in starting his own production house. I think he's actually savvy enough to have thought that through, to know that it can be a double-edged sword, as we'll see with the other cases today, a double-edged sword to really stand, on your father's laurels.
Yeah, and it's very intentional compared to some of the other careers we'll look at.
But then after, the second show, which is this little dark indie film, he does Ustad Hotel.
Yeah, and that is such a... Second show was like an obvious, like, I'm not going to be like a soft... I'm not going to be like the kid that you guys knew, like, as a celebrity son. I'm going to be dark. And then, like, in Ustad Hotel, he kind of returns to that, like, I'm actually like this kid you guys know because you know my dad. He kind of plays the type in that movie. Like, I was like, Ustad Hotel is like how I imagined Dulquer Salmaan would be, like a little spoiled rich kid.
But yeah, and I find it interesting, like that might have been a first choice film. That would have been an obvious first choice as a film. But I like that he still owns it. Yeah, that was me. This is also me.
There's a little bit of a Prithviraj comparison in that Prithviraj went with Nandanam, where he's like the spoiled rich kid, and then he went to Stop Violence, and Dulquer, or he had that little rom-com, Nakshatra Kannala Rajakumaran, but like nobody knows that movie compared to like Dulquer, who did the dark role, and then he did the rich kid role.
And then he did the dark role again.
He did.
Tivram.
Oh, you know what? It's interesting. He went second show, Ustad Hotel, Tivram, ABCD. So he like went back and forth between like dark and like, this is what you guys think I am roles.
Oh, and Tivram is the first time we actually get a Mammootty reference in a Dulquer film. I actually like and don't like this film at the same time. I like it because I get what they were trying to do. I'm not sure it really worked out well, But I actually think Dulquer was a really good choice for that because it's, spoiler, it's the story of a man, played by Dulquer, who's a music composer for films, and he plans the perfect murder. And we discover through the film why he plans this perfect murder. And we don't know much about it, but his character is very dark in the first half. And then the first half is all in the present, and the second half is mostly in the past. And in the second half, we see where he meets the woman who will become his wife and how this all happens and how very much they're in love. And that's like he's playing both of those sides. He's playing the nice guy and he's playing this very dark character as well. And I think Fahad could have carried, if that's true, I think Fahad could have carried off the darker side really well. But I don't tend to enjoy Fahad as much where he's trying to play these, nice, sweet lover boy types.
I think when Fahad plays it's so weird because this is like his Bangalore Days role is like when he plays like the urban lover boy types. I just don't believe him in it. But like when he plays like a rural lover boy, I'm like, that's exactly what I want to see him in. So I think you're right that this is like the kind of urbane, sophisticated like lover boys that Dulquer is kind of known for is like the light side of the room, and then he plays the dark side, which he continues to like balance that so well in his career. Like it's so funny that he doesn't have a darker like image the way Fahad does, because Dulquer has consistently played darker roles, but his image is so much less intense as a person.
Yeah, and as I said, I saw that discussion about his first dark role, and I was like, have you watched everything in his career? I do wonder sometimes.
Yeah, it's like Second Show, it's Divam, it's Kamati Param, it's Kali. He's like played so many intense roles, but for some reason they don't seem to stick to him that much.
Which is unfortunate because he really does bring something different from other people who inhabit that space as well. Which is the point. I mean, we don't all want one actor for every dark role because, movie watching would be incredibly boring in that case.
I think what Dulquer has going for him sometimes is I think he could have done a movie like Love. Like, I think he could have very easily done a movie like Love, and he could have played. And every, like the kind of toxic relationship depicted in it, I think he would have been perfect for that because he's so handsome. Like, he's so handsome. And like, that's exactly the kind of person that you as a woman can imagine yourself like getting into a toxic relationship with.
I wouldn't want to, but
that is a good idea. But I'm saying it's so easy to fit into that dynamic with a like not boy next door, handsome, like non-threatening person like him.
Yeah, and you'd be in and trapped before you even realized there was a problem, and then then what do you do? Basically,
we would say that, hey, everybody, give Dulquer more credit for like the dark aspects of his characters.
Yeah, I think that's really fair. I mean, I think that's a career. There have been some films that haven't done well, and I mean, he's always been good, even in films that haven't done as well. He's sort of very consistent as a performer, and I think that's something to say. When you're building a career, I mean, are there huge flops? Well, there are things that haven't done, like Tivram was very much panned. The film he did a couple years ago, which was sort of a Massey film. And everybody was saying, oh, well, it's his first time doing a Massey film. And I thought, well, what about Vikramaditya?
Yeah.
Like, that's a Massey film.
Which one are you talking about? Because I'm trying to think of like which one would be considered super Massey in this.
I saw it in the theater 2 years ago, and like we were one of 5 people in the theater, so that you can tell how that went.
Is it Ori Yamandan Premakada? Yeah, I like never watched that movie, so I don't even know what it's about.
I watched it and I have no idea what it was about. It wasn't a great film, and I think maybe that's the only point where the performance was a bit of a struggle for him. That's what it felt like watching it.
He's trying to play like a Vijay type, like the kind of roles Vijay plays in like the movies used. Yeah, that's what the poster even looks like. So that makes sense to me that he's not good at pulling that off.
Yeah, it wasn't a good fit for him. But, given the overall arc of his career, and I think I do want my actors taking chances on things that maybe don't suit them. Maybe it's a gamble, and maybe it might have paid off. It didn't this time, but I think I'd rather see people taking more chances than sitting very comfortably in a wheelhouse.
I think he's not good at playing rural characters the way Fahad is, and I think maybe that's where I see like a gap in his filmography, because he does have a certain amount of range, but maybe where I don't see his range extend is like he can't play characters that are quite as rooted as. I think maybe that's what his dad is. Like Mammootty has a history of playing like patriarchs, but other than Rajamanikam, which was like purposely kind of playing against like people's image of him as like a very sophisticated guy. I can't, like when he's in movies, he plays like very stiff patriarchs, even when in rural movies. So he's like the upholder of like feudalism, the upholder of like the order, patriarchy, castes, things like that. And I feel like that's maybe it's just not in either of their like repertoire. That's one of the things we always compare Mohanlal and Mammootty to is like the distance in their like range. It's like Mohanlal can play every kind of role, and he's a little bit funny in like extremely urbane roles. Like he can't play like a CID, the CBI director type roles, but like Mammootty can. Mohanlal can't. Plays like these extremely rooted rural characters, which Mammootty struggles with. And I wonder if it's just not a thing Dulquer can do either. I wonder if it's just not something that's in his DNA as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the assessment I've come to watching all those careers. And it's like when I see Mammootty in something that's very rural and rooted, I'm like, I'm not going to enjoy him in this, am I? And I don't. But give him a role where he's playing a lawyer or that kind of more urban kind of character, and I really love him. And again, it's like if you've got, maybe that's why you've got Mohanlal and Mammootty as sort of the two stars, because they do occupy different spaces in terms of their filmographies and what they're able to really pull off well.
The thing is, Mammootty is the actual one who's actually from like an agrarian background. His family were actually farmers, compared to Mohanlal, who's a city kid. And so that's really funny that they in their film lives they can't. And Mammootty still, you see him like out like during farming season, like I've seen him like planting crops and stuff to like promote farming. And, I can't imagine Mohanlal doing any of that. I don't think he likes to get money, to be honest. Like Mohanlal likes classical music, classical architecture. And he's a very fancy man in real life.
Yeah, it's really funny that their on-screen lives, their on-screen abilities are so much in contrast to their actual personalities.
Sorry, I'm Googling something. There's a fascinating academic article about comparing the kinds of masculinity Mohanlal and Mammootty represent in Malayalam cinema, and maybe we can put it in the show notes. Mammootty represents like an extremely high caste ideal. Mohanlal represents like a somewhere in the medium range, but and he can like go into like the lowest caste. But Mammootty is the one who's more often played Dalits, I think, in Bhudakanadi and things like that. So it's there's a like really interesting discussion about like masculinity and like what the kinds of Malayali masculinity that both of them represent. But that's for a different episode. But yeah, back to Dulquer. Yeah, so we Dulquer, maybe challenge yourself, try to play more rooted roles, see if it works out. Maybe do a Rajamani Game too, like where you try to do a Trivandrum accent and like have people, because I'm from Trivandrum, people have like used that accent with me, like, and like I love that movie. Your guys' accent is so funny. It's something I've heard a lot. So maybe try to do a Trivandrum accent, Dulquer.
I'm not sure. I wonder if he can do accents.
Yeah, always has a very cosmopolitan Malayalam. Like his language grasp is very good compared to like a lot of kids who grew up in Chennai. His language grasp is very good. The next person we're not about to talk about is so good with local dialects.
So you want to move? You want to move on
Yeah.
to Fahad? So sometimes I don't even know where to begin, because I had known that there was this first film, and I had seen it without subtitles and kind of thought, maybe I need subtitles. Maybe I'll get more out of this if there are subtitles.
So you want to talk about who is Fahad Faasil, first of all, what family he comes from?
Yeah, actually, why don't you go there?
Yeah, so Fahad Fazil is the son of the director Fazil. He comes from a pretty big family, actually, from Alapura, and actually that's where Kunjako Wilban comes from, I think. And they have a lot of like, Fazil especially is like kind of one of the big directors of the 80s, 90s Malayalam cinema that Malayalam cinema first became famous for. You know, he's directed classics basically.
I think I became more familiar with Fazil because at first when I realized I was watching a lot of Hindi remakes of his films.
Mostly by Priyadarshan, right? Who was also one of his assistant directors for a bit, including for Manichazatai. You know, Fasil's done Manil Vijaya Puko, which is like Mohanlal's big debut. You know, pretty much like any like beloved Malayalam film you can think of of that era comes from Fasil or one of the assistant directors associated with him. So he's a towering figure in Malayalam cinema.
And he launched Kunchaka Boban.
Yes, so he launched Kunchaka Boban when Kunchaka Boban was like 18, with this kind of youthful, like lovers against their family story. And 2 years later, he was like, this movie was a huge success. I got an 18-year-old kid. Let me launch him with essentially the same like cast around them. And it's going to be great. He's going to be the next Kunjaka Boban. And didn't work out.
No, and it was quite funny because I was watching it and I was thinking, this is like a Kunjaka Boban film. This is his space. This is what he does, or what he did at the time, really, really well. I mean, we both love his first film.
We talked about it in the last episode, like all my childhood memories of his first films.
But
like Kayatun Durate has a great songs.
It does. The choreography is really unfortunate.
It's a movie made for Kunjaka Boban. Like that role should have, like, because it's for a good dancer.
Well, and part of me was the dancing. Nobody's dancing is really good because the choreography isn't really good, and like the cynical part of me was, did they create bad choreography so that Fahad wouldn't look too bad?
The clothes are so funny. I mean, I know clothes look so funny in like 90s Malayalam cinema anyway, like Western clothes, but like all his clothes like make him look so small as a person. Like they're huge compared to who he is.
And he has like hair.
Yes, hair is huge.
Yeah, of the period. But I watched this film and I mean, he apologized for it and said it wasn't his father's fault. And I'm sorry. I think this was his father's fault. Like, I really do. I really think his father made a choice to launch him in a way that just didn't suit him at all. There are little moments in this film where he's actually quite good. And I always ask myself when I watch a first film, how do I think I feel about this person going forward? You know, Dulquer in Second Show, I could see there was something there. I knew he was going to have a career of some kind. I go back and I look, if I had been seeing this first film at the time, I would have said, this kid is going nowhere. Like really, like maybe supporting roles, because he's not bad at parts. Like I was so stunned at how that film hit me And this is after seeing and knowing he's got like a substantial career now and seeing what he can do.
It is his dad's fault because he was only like 18 and his dad basically like pushed him into doing that role, it seems. And they used his like pet name that his parents call him, Shanu. And like, he is called Shanu by like Dulquer and stuff because they grew up together. It was like, it's like this baby, like he's literally just taken out of like secondary school and put into a movie. And that's the same thing that happened to Kunjaka Bowman, but like he was massively successful in it. Poor Fahad had to flee the country saying, I mean, I'm sure he did want to pursue an education, but like he left for America because of like people were ragging on him so much in Kerala.
Which, I mean, 7 or 8 years later, he starts to come back and build a career, which says to me that he must have wanted to be in the business on some level.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, it didn't see... When he was 18, maybe he did want to be in the business, but to me, it really felt like his dad wanted him in the business. And by the time he left the country, he did his education, he lived abroad a few years, he probably did realize that like there was something he could offer the industry. Now, I don't know if he saw like his immense talent. I don't know if he was doing theater in America, things like that. Maybe he was, I don't know. But yeah, this like very intense like actor persona from the person he was, or the person we all thought he was when he was a teenager was a huge transition. And he started off, when he came back to India, he didn't start off with like leading roles. He really felt like he had to earn the audience's trust and appreciation back. It helped that he looked like a completely different person when he came back. He was losing a lot of his hair, like no mustache.
Yeah, and what struck me, like I mentioned, the first time I saw him was in Kerala Cafe, the anthology film. To be honest, the only portion of that film that I really like is Anjali Menon's Happy Journey. But he's in one of these films in this portmanteau film.
Yeah, it was Mrittyunjayam.
Tilikan is the one who stands out in that bit. I mean, because of course he's going to. But I did think, I mean, again, it's a tiny little role in this little film in a bigger anthology. And then he did Pramani and Cocktail and Tournament.
Pramani is the first one I saw him in, and like I remember thinking, sometimes you watch movies and you're like, you see a side character go by and like, I want to know more about that character. And that was what he was in Pramani to me. He was like a government worker or something like that. And he was going up against
Mammootty.
And I was like, oh, that's a fascinating character. And I'd like to know more about that character. And, I didn't know who he was. I didn't know, like, I was just like, that's the way I feel about a lot of the Vineet Srinivasan, like, extended cast. Like, that actor is really good. I want to know more about his character. And so he was like, in a very like mediocre film like Pramani, he was that for me.
And I think it was interesting that he, in this little tiny role, even in scenes with Mammootty, he wasn't outshone by Mammootty. Yeah. And that impressed me a lot, and you've got Cocktail, he's got a really tiny role. It's an Anup Menon film, and I have a lot of mixed feelings about Anup Menon. But a tiny role as kind of a crappy boss. We can see where this territory is going now. But then Tournament is kind of, directed by Lal and is a little more massy film. And he plays one of 3 friends who are cricket players going to tryouts. I love the first half of the film because it's more about friendships and a road trip as they go through this. But then it completely switches in the second half and you realize that everyone's trying to undermine everybody else in this film. And he disappears at some point because he's one of the people who gets injured and is not going forward on this journey. It's the kind of space of his first film, sort of, song and dance and a little more upbeat and massy. But he doesn't seem as... he seems to be able to do that, even if that's not the space maybe he's most known for or most comfortable in. He doesn't look as uncomfortable in it this time around.
You see that around 2008 to 2010. He really is just just like dipping his toes in, like doing a bunch of side characters, just paying his dues really, like is what it feels like to me. He like shows up in a couple of cameo appearances, which like a lot of young actors do to like build favors in the industry. And I don't imagine him like showing up in cameos anymore, that he's a big star, but like he's really like putting himself through the paces as a upcoming actor. And that's, we hit Chapa Kush in 2011, and that's when people really like, this kid's got the chops. And actually for me, even though he won the state award, I think in Chapa Kush, as we've mentioned this before, Vineet Srinivasan is like the more interesting character, and Ramya Nambishan is the more interesting character because she's like the kind of woman who's been betrayed by Fahad. Fahad kind of just plays this like manipulative, spoiled brat. He's very good at it, and he kind of comes back to those traits a lot in his characters. Yeah, he lets himself be superseded by other actors in the movie in a very graceful way that like elevates the film.
Yeah, and then we have Bangalore Days.
We have 22 Female Kottayam, which is like, again, back to the kind of manipulative character.
Yeah, I don't like that film.
You don't?
I don't. I have huge problems with that film. Not with Fahad, just I don't want to get into it unless we do a whole episode around but part of it is they did a whole women empowerment thing for the publicity, and then I saw what the film did, and I'm not terribly happy with vengeful women being the standard bearers for female empowerment.
Okay, well, maybe, especially in light of like Promising Young Woman, maybe this is like another episode into itself.
Yeah.
After he's got like some credit as an actor with Chapa Kush, he goes through like 22 Female Kottayam, Diamond Necklace, Unnamed Rasool, like Amin, which was, I think a lot of people really took a liking to the kind of rural characters he plays in Amin, and in, I guess, Unnamed Rasool, where he's a bit more tragic. North 24 Kadam, like the same director. I feel like I really was like, this guy is somebody I want to keep watching with Indian Pranayagada, where he's like, I don't know, he just plays like he plays like a guy who's in it for himself, but then like along the way he gets to be, falls in love, like he gets to do the whole song and dance thing. And I feel like that's like a lot of the skills that he could have used in Kayat and Durate, for me at least, came to fruition in Indian Pranayagada as a romance.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating career once he started to rebuild it. And I mentioned Bangalore Days only because after all of that, that was I had saw Bangalore Days in, I think it was probably the first film I saw in it. No, I saw Urmi in a theater. Went to see Bangalore Days in a theater, and it was the first time that I had seen anyone cheer for someone other than Mohanlal or Mammootty. He came on and the crowd went wild. And I was like, really? Like, I was really surprised at how, and not Dulquer, and not Niven, but Fahad.
Yeah, and I think that it also has to do with the fact that, like, in all those films I described before, he was just like back to back, just like knocking them down, like setting them up and knocking them down. And it was like a really excellent, fruitful few years for him, where he was just like going from like negative roles to like sweet roles, and like he was showing like an incredible amount of range. So by the time like he got to Bangalore Days, and he's actually like this really, he's not like one of the main characters, he's like a side character in Nasriya's plot, but even though he's a side character, he gets to play that kind of role as like a superstar at that point, compared to like the other two guys who are still like working on their superstar status. Yeah, so I think by Bangalore Days he had become a superstar.
Yeah, it was interesting for me because mostly online I was hearing about the others, and very few people. I find it really fascinating that not as many people at that time were talking about Fahad online. And I don't know what, I cannot know what the perception of all of them would have been in India.
In India, I was living in India at that time. And I think like Niven Pauly was coming off, he was still floating on Tatatin Mariatif, and he did a great job with Nasriya in Om Shanti Oshana. But I think it was the combination of like, I remember the press being most excited about it being an Anjali Menon film and like having the star cast. It was like a little bit of a Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum thing, like where people were like the star cast with this like superstar like screenwriter or director who is like making her first mainstream film, and I think people were really excited about it. So I am surprised that like I think it was the combination that got people excited at that time, and I'm surprised that Fahad got the applause, but like all those guys were like super hyped up. I think I remember in my theater, I watched it in Bombay when Niven first came on, like people started clapping because of his little rant that he was doing, talking about socialist India.
Well, because it's a clear callback to Amitabh Bachchan.
Is it?
Yeah, isn't it? That dialogue in Amar Akbar Anthony.
The repeating. I didn't think of it that way. I see. Maybe that's what she intended it to be. I remember the starting of the song where like the guy, he like gives a little rhyming dialogue of things that actually make sense, but you think is nonsense.
Yeah. But that's what it is. That kind of dialogue. I don't know if it was a conscious. I mean, given Anjali Menon, it feels like it would be. Okay. And it would be. But yeah.
This is kind of like Amar Akbar Anthony in that like there's three big stars who are at the center of it. That makes sense, actually, thinking about it. In the kind of era we're right now, with the streaming services and the smaller films that we can watch at home, obviously it makes perfect sense to me that Fahad is just thriving. Like his movies are, like Joji, whether it's See You Soon. Has he had any other streaming releases?
Yes, there was another one from the same director as See You Soon. Irul?
Okay, I don't think that people like that one much. But like the kind of actor he is, he's perfectly suited for the streaming services. He is, as much as Malayalis consider him a superstar, he's not a person who is like a massy film star. He's very much an actor's actor, and the kind of work he's putting out in the streaming OTT era is so good on streaming services. Like it's a great, like I can turn on a Fazil movie and like I know I'm gonna be treated to something unique and different and something that will stay with me.
I put in our notes that I think Trance is probably my favorite of his performances. Not that the other ones aren't good. They're wonderful, but there are moments when he's on screen in Trance, I'm literally breathless because he's so, I don't even have words for it. Like the performance is so, like the film, whatever you think about it, and there are people on both sides of the fence in terms of the film. I love it, but there are moments where he is so breathtaking, and the way he's shot is just breathtaking, and the performance he's given is just like I honestly cannot believe it. It's like, how does he get better and better and better all the time?
Speaking of favorite films, I think mine, just on an emotional level, is Maheshin Pratigaram. For me, my mom is from that part of the world, and he just like exemplifies like such a simplicity in his character. Like he's just about the small pleasures in life and the small revenge in his life. I just love that, like, in that movie. I just love everything about that movie, even though it's like kind of a kooky movie at the end of the day. But like just the sense of place in that movie in Idiki, and like the people, it is in a lot of ways what Malayalam movies do best, the sense of rootedness. So for me, that's probably his favorite starring role. And again, in things like Kumbhalangi Nights, he does such a great job letting other actors be the big star of the movie, while like so gracefully like supporting them in a way that elevates the movie.
I think one of the things that got me very excited about doing this episode was very much looking back at his filmography. And I went through all of those early films again. And quite honestly, I just want to keep watching film after film after film. And I mean, I love all the others, but I just don't feel the same way. Like even the worst films in Fahad's filmography, I'm happy to watch, because he always brings something to it.
I think all of this is like, we praise him. Everybody praises him so much for his acting. I think part of it is like, it's because he's not conventionally handsome. Part of it is like, we're so surprised that the man is so riveting on screen because he's not conventionally handsome. He looks very different in like when he's groomed in a certain way versus like when he's not groomed in a certain way. He's a chameleon in the way he looks. But I don't think he looks so like in the Bangladesh parts where he's like playing the biker, I don't know what they did to his hair, but like it looked fuller, it looked cooler. But he doesn't always have that cool hair. Like he transforms in every role physically. And, to a certain extent, we say that about Mohanlal, at least we used to say that about Mohanlal. I think Mohanlal is just like a bigger presence in the screen. Fahad is a very slight man, and just the fact that he occupies the screen is so effectively I think it's not something we would expect. And I think that's why we are always like surprised and like we want to reiterate that he is so special because of his talent and charm on screen. And I will say he's married to a beloved actress herself, Nasriya Nazim. And actually his career took a bit of a dip in the 2 years after he married her because people were mad that he married her. There's like a 13-year age difference between them. So people were, and it was an arranged marriage, and like people were like, he's like rail robbing, and people were kind of mad about it. And I wasn't mad about it. I remember being mad about him marrying her and like her not acting right after that. And, we have this like legacy of actresses like Manju Adir, like Parvati, Jairam's Parvati. A lot of these great actresses just not acting after they're married. So everybody was like, this old guy married her. Like, suddenly, like the whole thing changed. The whole game changed when they decided to get married. They were like, this beloved actor turned from this old guy is marrying this little kid, and he's not letting her act. And he kept saying, no, it's not me telling her not to act. She just doesn't want to act. She wants to finish her school, and she wants to like build her home and stuff like that. And so for a few years, he did have a bit of a career dip after they got married. His movies didn't do well until Mahesh and Dabruti got him. And I was like, I think that's what I forgave him for marrying her.
Well, and I spent like 2 years whining online about how we needed her to come back. And it was really stunning to watch Pramani in the last week and realize she was in it too. And she was like 15 or 16.
She played his sister.
No, she plays Mammootty's adopted daughter. Like, it's a really small role, but I was like, oh my goodness, she's such a baby. And she is compared to him.
For me, I knew her from like when she was hosting stuff on TV. Like my parents would watch all these singing shows, so I like knew her from that. And so like I think me and most Malayalis had this like really protective feeling towards her. She would say, maybe she would say differently. Like for me, I always saw it as like she was like this teenager who was like in love with her college professor or something, and like she agreed to the marriage because like he's probably like such an impressive actor, and like she probably looked up to him, and that was like the dynamic. Like in my head, I was like, he's taking advantage of this little kid, and I didn't need him to like leave her alone. But they're probably happy. Like I'm not. But, we have this history just because around that time they got married was when Manju Varir, like, left her marriage. And she got married when she was a teenager or, like, 20 to a man who was, like, 12 years older than her. So we just know, as Malayalis, we have, like, some amount of trauma about marriages breaking up because of, like, the huge age difference and, like, how early the actresses get married.
Yeah, I was just grateful when she came back.
Like, I'm glad she's back in the industry. I'm glad... I think I really really think this man thought that his career was over because white people were so mad at him. So I'm glad he like pushed her to like start like producing and things like that. So, you know, good for him, I guess, that he's like encouraging her to have a career.
So we should probably move on to the last person we're going to talk about today, Pranav Mohanlal.
Son of the Mohanlal. Mohanlal has no issue using his first name as Pranav's last name or using his connections.
I really feel bad, and I really feel for Pranav. I have no idea.
So when did you first learn about somebody called Pranav Mohanlal? When did you like first know about him?
I kind of was aware that he had done the movie as a child.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't seen it. I mean, I did have seen it now, but I hadn't seen it. And it wasn't really available, 10 years ago when I first started looking. And then his name just sort of came up every once in a while. I think more so when he was AD for Jitu Joseph on Drishyam. And there was a lot of talk about him coming back into movies. So, I mean, that's essentially about all I knew at the time.
So we should probably say that Pranav is not just the son of a big movie star. He is the grandson of a major producer. His mom is from a big Tamil film family as well. Her name is Sujitra Balaji, and like her dad is known for big Tamil films. The first Billa with Rajinikanth is Balaji film. So this is a big film family, and I think I remember hearing that. Mohanlal, Sujitra actually wrote Mohanlal a fan letter, and that's how they got to know each other, and that's how they met. So it makes sense to me that maybe this guy just hasn't considered there's a life outside film.
Well, and we've talked before, and you've mentioned that you're not sure he really wants to be in movies.
Yeah,
who knows?
I think so, because the first time I knew of somebody called Pranav Mohanlal, I mean, I assumed Mohanlal had a kid somewhere, but I think the first time I heard about Pranav Mohanlal was actually a Facebook fan page. A couple of my friends from Indian school days were tagging each other in a few pictures of him that he had put on his profile, or somebody had taken of him, and they were like, he's so hot. And I remember this was late 2000s or 2010 maybe, and people were saying when's he gonna make his debut, he's so hot, everybody just expected him to do it. And nobody connected this was no one connected to the film industry. It was just girls online who were being he's hot, he should be in movies.
Yeah, and I think I heard some of that buzz around the time that Dulquer was launching, because it was okay, well, if Mammootty's son is going to be launching, what about Mohanlal's son? So there was a little bit of that. He is really good looking.
He's very good looking, and Dulquer at least had some work before he got into the movies. I don't know if Pranav has had any work done. He even though his entire face is covered with a beard, he's a very good looking dude. But his life so far and his career has been extremely unintentional compared to Dulquer's. It felt like he was avoiding doing films for the longest time. He was literally zigzagging from people's expectations, and he's really into adventure sports and traveling the world and a lot of rich kid hobbies basically. And I guess somebody, or maybe his dad, told him it's time to settle down and make a career for himself. So his first step into movies was being an AD for Jitu Joseph. Actually he started with the Drishyam Tamil remake, and he's done a few Jitu Joseph movies as an AD, and then Jitu Joseph decided to launch him, I guess, as in Adi. Yeah. And I remember, and he was, and compared to a lot of these guys we're talking about, he's really old. At that point he's 27, 28, all these guys are launching as teenagers or in their early 20s. So like that, more that just the fact that he waited that long is what gives me the impression that like this is not a guy who wants to be in the industry. And I remember like watching a behind the scenes like video of Adi shooting. And it was Jitu Joseph and Jitu Joseph's wife standing on both sides. They were like, say something, say something. Like Jitu Joseph's wife is like, yeah, say something to Pranav. Like, and he's just like, I'm sorry, I know this is an audio medium, but the guy was like shrugging and being like, I'm being forced to talk by this auntie who is in charge of me.
Well, and let's talk about that whole film. Because what I wrote down was everything about the film screams Mohanlal. I mean, you've got Jitu Joseph, who gave Mohanlal sort of a career resurgence with Drishyam. You've got Ashirvad Cinemas, so it's Anthony Perumbavoor.
Who will, as we said, produce anything Mohanlal is in.
Yeah, and you even have when they're doing the credits. They do this spinny things with the names. So Mohanlal's name comes up first and then Pranav for Pranav Mohanlal. I was like, oh my goodness. And there are the first, he sings a song. He's supposed to be a musician. He wants to be a music director, if I'm remembering correctly. But it opens with him playing guitar and singing a song in a club. And it's a song from Mohanlal's first film. And there are a number of Mohanlal references. And I was like, here's the problem I have. Whether this kid is just, this young man is deciding to, and he still feels like a kid to me. Whether he's deciding to make a career or not sure about wanting to make a career, from my perspective, it sort of feels like his father is overwhelming everything here.
Yes.
It feels so much about Mohanlal and so little about Pranav, with one exception. What they did in Adi was introduce parkour to Malayalam cinema, and they actually put out the money to get like 4 French guys who pretty much are, the creators of parkour, who had worked with people like Luc Besson in France, when he included parkour in his films. So they did this, and Pranav does his own stunts. He's not as proficient at parkour as the 4 guys they brought in. I wouldn't expect him to be, but he really does a really good job with that. I find he has kind of a physical presence and a physicality when they make use of it that way. It's really good. Whether that can translate into anything as a career, I don't know. He also has this unfortunate resting face that looks like he's ready to cry.
He has a resting crying face.
He does. And I mean, even in the film where he was 10 years old or something that he made as a child actor, he constantly looks like he's ready to cry. And I think it's really unfortunate. But when he smiles, he has an incredibly sweet smile. So I just don't know. Like I look at his first film and I think the presence of his father sits so heavy here. I don't know how he manages to establish his own presence. There are some things I like about him. And it's pretty much the same for his second film. There was a lot of Mohanlal references. Again, the moments he's best at are the very physical things. But I still don't know. Like, I really don't get a read from him.
Yeah, he really feels like he's just floating on his dad's merits, and that can fly. Like, that's what Abhishek Bachchan did for a really long time. Does Malayalam cinema have space for Pranav Mohanlal?
Well, and I think this is one of the reasons why we're looking at Star Kids. How many chances do you get before you don't get any more chances? And it's really obvious from the people we've been looking at so far that they've made a decision to be there, and they've made choices about what they're doing in terms of their careers, mostly independent of their star families. But Pranav, I don't see him as, I just don't know what to make of him. And I find, on the one hand, I really love that Mammootty has taken a step back. Even if sometimes it's funny how he is so silent about Dulquer. And I think Mohanlal is the opposite. Like, when there's a film coming out, when Pranav is involved, he's constantly doing promotion for it.
Network is so involved, it's Priyadarshan, it's Anthony Perumbagur, it's Chittu Joseph. Like Mohanlal is famously like a camp guy in the industry. Like he has a camp and he sticks to that, his group of friends. And he is either Pranav isn't interested in going outside that camp, or like the family is forcing him to be in that camp. But Pranav, like, if you want to be in the movies, go out, like step outside of your dad's shadow, because nothing grows in that shadow. Like it's too big. It's too overwhelming. He's such a big star. He's so beloved. We will not see you as your own person if you don't step outside.
And that's it. So that now I am wondering, because he's going to be in a film directed by Vineet Srinivasan, Hridayam. Mm-hmm. I will admit I'm a little wary because it sounds like a romance.
And it's got Kalyani Pradesh. She is lovely, but it's just like it doesn't feel like a departure the way typically Vineet's movies, like he's gonna build a like unique cast that's been picked out for their uniqueness. Like we love Kalyani. Like, if this movie was Kalyani and some rando guy, I would be like super excited, because Kalyani is a star and she deserves to like her space.
Yeah, and I am not convinced, based on what I've seen from Pranav, that he can handle a romance. I don't think it's his wheelhouse. Months from now when the film releases, maybe I'll be wrong. On the other hand, I keep saying I can't read him, and maybe that's part of it. Maybe they haven't had a chance. Maybe he hasn't been able to tap in because he's still under his father's shadow so much. I like him enough that it frustrates me that he's there in this place and people are doing things with him and for him, and they don't seem to work for me, except I see something in him that I think, the right director, the right writer, the right kind of script to take advantage of what he can do. I don't know. I mean, does that exist?
Vidya Jamwal, right? The Hindi actor, he's really good at martial arts. And like, he actually has like a YouTube series where he interviews like Hong Kong action stars. And like, I think it's so fascinating because he wants to build an industry of like action movies in Hindi cinema. I love Hong Kong action movies. Like I hate Dishum and I hate the Marvel type big explosion movies, but like Hong Kong movies, wuxia movies, like the athleticism of those moves are beautiful. And Vidya Jamal is one of the few people I've seen in Indian cinema who comes from that same place of just like it's almost like ballet. Like the way he moves like in those action sequences is gorgeous. And maybe for somebody like Pranav Mohanlal, that is the kind of movie he wants to make. I don't know if there's space for that in Malayalam cinema, but I think Hindi cinema could do it.
Yeah, and as I said, I mean, the parkour sections that he's involved in Adi are really lovely, and to impressively doing, because parkour is not easy. And again, to be standing up there on screen with, the people who pretty much invented parkour and put it on screen, either themselves or with Luc Besson, like he really does hold his own. Like I get frustrated because I think there's something there. I see something there. I just have no idea how it can be tapped into. As you said, maybe not in Malayalam cinema, and certainly not under the shadow of his father.
Yeah, and we're talking, there's some great stunt and action choreographers like Peter Hein, who's like the Vietnamese Tamil, action choreographer, and he's, so like Tamil cinema has tried it. I mean, I don't think Tamil cinema does because Peter Hein is always trying to choreograph like men who don't have like the athleticism to carry it off. Maybe that's where Pranav Mohanlal should be like working with somebody like Peter Hein, who is like so far outside his like dad's like network of like people, the industry contacts. But I'm trying to see if there's some place for him in the Malayalam or other film industries in India. And like I can see some like niche things that he could do. But is he interested? Or would he rather be doing all this off screen, like in his real life?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I guess I get a little frustrated because I see something there, but on the other hand, I mean, here is the core of what we're actually trying to get to. If you don't really want to be invested in putting a career, why are you bothering? Why are you, having people put up their money for you on so many levels, either from the production side or from people paying for a ticket? Because it's only going to be so long that they're going to buy tickets because you're Mohanlal's son. And I think, that sort of Pranav unfortunately underlines that you can be a star kid and it will get you chances and it will open a door for you. But if you're not willing, or you're not willing on any front to build that career, it's not going to happen. And that's as it should be, I guess.
Yeah, it is hard for us to sit here and go off a couple of movies he's done. I wish he did more side character roles. I feel like that's where we can see if he's actually got the chops, because just like we're talking about like Fahad coming in Pramani, and I'm like, I want to know more about him. Like maybe just being interesting on screen is most powerful when you're a side character. So I hope he maybe tries to do some side character roles. I know he wants to do maybe a little bit of these larger than life roles because that's where action comes in. But we're talking about Malayalam cinema, not big budgets. Unless Anthony P is over there.
I'm sure his purse has its limits too. I mean, at least if he's putting up money for Mohanlal, he's going to get the money back, even with a film that, may not get critical acclaim.
Yeah.
I mean, the fans are going to come out and buy tickets. I mean, that's where you talked about the fan associations earlier. They're going to make, the film make money at the box office, whatever the critics think about it.
And, it is interesting to me, considering that he has this family lineage that also includes Tamil cinema, that he didn't launch in Tamil cinema in the first place, because he could have. Like he could definitely have. We're going to talk about a few star kids who have Malayalam film lineages, but started off in Tamil cinema because maybe that's where they grew up and where they're most comfortable in a Tamil speaking milieu. So maybe there's a lot of things Pranav could do, but right now we're kind of in a stasis.
Maybe that's where we should end, particularly as you brought up where we're going to go next.
So we're going to talk about people who've spread their wings a little farther than the Malayalam films, which is going to talk about Kirti Suresh, Kalyani Priyadarshan, and Kalidasan Jairam.
Thanks for listening to the Poland in Empathy podcast.
If you like what you're hearing, remember to come back for our next episode and share our podcast with your friends.
If you'd like to connect with us, you can email us at polandinapati@gmail.com or reach out to us on our Twitter feed @polandinapati. See you next time.